Today we're going to be talking about ABCs of career change with Marcia Wall, career and success coach, and she's going to be facilitating us on today's panel, Former Teachers Tell Their Stories. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Marcia, but before I do that, just a little housekeeping rules. We encourage you to turn your cameras on if you can. We are also going to be recording this session so that others can also listen to this recording later for those who couldn't make it. And there will be some time at the end of the presentation for you to ask questions. In the meantime, Marcia is going to be, again, facilitating some questions for our panelists, Chrissy and Christina. Is there anything that I might have missed? All righty. Marcia, go ahead and take it away.
All right. We'll actually go to the next slide really quickly. I'm Marcia Wall. I'm an independent career success coach with MW Career Services. And those are my links. I'm going to be dropping them into the chat later. And then our next individual, this is Christy White. She's a literacy advocate and bookseller, and like me, also a former teacher. She's with Usborne Books. She'll be telling us a lot more about that. And as you can tell, she also is very photogenic. And lastly, we have Chrissy Moore. So yes, we have a Christy and a Chrissy. And she's a PB Resolute Senior Consultant. And I'm not going to lie, I don't know exactly what that means. She tried to explain it to me, but I think the important thing is that she has a story about teaching that she's going to share with all of you. So Gabby, you can stop sharing your screen and we're going to go ahead and take it from there. All right. I hope everyone is doing really well this morning. I'm going to jump right into it and ask Christy if you will tell us briefly what you do now and what your teaching career was like that before.
Sure. So first of all, professionally, most people actually know me as Christina. So if anybody from like my book world knows me, it's Christina. They don't know me as Christy. That's mostly my family. So I was going to work in theater. That's what I was going to do. And I have a degree in musical theater. And up until I graduated, that was the path I was on. And then I realized that I didn't want to work 6 nights a week because I wanted to have kids someday. And so I went to work at a law office, and it was family law, which is divorces, and it's kind of sad. But a lot of kids would come in with their parents and they'd tell me about their school. And I had worked in schools for 10 years before all of this. I had often been a bilingual instructional assistant or an aide, and because I speak Spanish, and I did that all through college because it's a really good paying job for a college student and you can work part-time. And I think a lot of college students don't think of jobs like that. They think of like fast food and things, but I really liked working in schools. And when these kids would come in with their parents, they'd tell me about their day. And I'd be like, you know, I kind of miss being in a school environment. And so I decided to go back and get my master's and my teaching degree. And I did that, and I taught for 3 years. And then I had my first child, my oldest daughter, she's 8. And that's when I stopped teaching and I stayed home with her. And about 3 years ago, I started selling books with Usborne Books and More, which fits really well with my job as a mom. And that's kind of where I am right now.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you. And we'll also look forward to hearing more about why bilingual education is so important to you, because I know it is, and that's a great part of your story. Chrissy, we would also love to hear from you.
All right, so I'm Chrissy, and I was a teacher for 10 years. I actually taught in Louisiana, in Texas, and in Illinois. Enjoyed it, but it hit a point where I was ready to have a kid, and I knew as an adult and working in education that I would not be successful at doing both. So I made that decision, and I jumped into a completely different profession that is IT, tech world. I'm pretty much an abbreviated version of a computer software developer.
We can't wait to hear more about that as well. I too was a teacher, kind of reluctantly. I became a visiting teacher. That's a fancy word for substitute. I also taught bilingual kindergarten, and then I also taught kindergarten and first grade in French and in Spanish in Louisiana. I eventually made the move into the college level teaching English, and I quickly realized that the pay wasn't good enough, that I had to grade a lot of bad papers for a living, and that it wasn't for me. And it took me a while to figure out what that was, but eventually I figured out that for me, it was coaching and mentoring people. And that's when I made the move into career services. So Christina, as we're calling you here, that's wonderful. Christina, how did you know that it was time for you to switch careers? And did you have any fears about doing that?
So, so even though I'd worked in education for a really long time, I adamantly did not want to be a teacher. Well, lots of people in my family were teachers, and it didn't look like a great job for me. And that's not what I wanted to do. I like working with kids, but that wasn't the path I was on. And then once I decided I didn't want to work in theater, it was kind of like, oh, what do I do now? And I thought about being a lawyer. That's why I went to go work at the law office. And ultimately, there are so many teaching jobs, right? Like there's just so many. Most of the time, it's a really like kind of an easy job to get into because they always need teachers. And it felt safe. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this teaching degree. I'm never going to regret it. My mom always said, you will never regret getting a degree. So I was like, I'm getting another degree. I'm going to do this. And even if I don't become a teacher forever, I knew that what I learned would probably be applicable, which I think we'll talk about later. And so I went and became a teacher. And in the 3 years that I was an actual class teacher, which I taught Spanish at a dual language charter school, I didn't love it. I mean, I think you hear this like idealized version of what it's like to be a teacher, that, you know, you're going in there and like nurturing all these children. But really, then you get into the classroom and it's top down. Everyone's just telling you what to do and how to teach, and you don't have a lot of freedom. And especially I was at a Title I school, and we really didn't have a lot of freedom, and it wasn't fun. And so when I was going to have my daughter, my husband and I were like, well, I'm going to stay home. Maybe I'll go back one day. And the longer I've been gone and the more I see what's going on in education today, I mean, the less likely it will be that I ever go back to teaching in the classroom, at least K-12. I don't know, maybe I'll get a PhD one day or something, but I like teaching and I like learning. I don't like public school. So I think having a kid was the main reason I quit, but I think there were a lot of reasons why I was not hesitant to quit. I was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing now. I think I didn't seem like a big loss at the time.
Well,
and fears.
Fears, yeah.
What I was going somewhere. Yeah, so when I quit, I was working with this amazing professor who, through my graduate program, and he was really big on bilingual education. And because I taught at a bilingual school, a lot of my students were my research. And I had been asked to speak at, or chosen, whatever, to speak at 2 international education conferences. Like literally the second one, I was pregnant, like with Alina. And so I felt like I was going somewhere. I was on a path, and there was definitely this fear of like, I'm getting off this path and I may never get back on. And I really liked being around scholars. Like when I was in this room of people with PhDs, I was like, these are my people. And I mean, even still, I feel a little bit like, should I go back into that world? Because I liked the research and I liked the conferences. That was fun. But I think you just have to trust that you're making the right decision at the right time, and you don't know what the future is going to bring. And I feel like even with the experience I have and the things that I've done, I can always go back to teaching. It's not going anywhere. And maybe I will start over, but I mean, I did it once, I can do it again. I say that if I felt like I was going somewhere, I can go somewhere again. So yeah, I mean, there's always a fear of starting something new, but I think it was the right decision for me. I don't regret it at all.
Well, good. And I look forward in a few minutes to hearing more about what you're doing now and what transferable skills you were able to use, because Christine is doing something really exciting. And, I'm hearing some of those frustrations with teaching, but I also know that those of us who are went into teaching, I think there were also many things we liked about it. And it is the right career for many people. And even if it was the right career for someone for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, just because you leave teaching doesn't necessarily mean that it was unenjoyable, right? There were many things I loved about teaching. And the things that I loved to most, I was able to take with me into a new career. So, Chrissy, how did you know that it was time to leave? And did you have any fears about that?
Yeah, so I actually, my education degree, I have a full elementary education degree, did it in the very traditional way, wanted to be a teacher, went to school, um, did it for 10 years. And I knew that it was time to go because I would spend every morning with several coworkers just complaining about the politics or complaining about working so many after hours, the lack of work-life balance. And it just hit me one morning, like, you can either make a change or you can sit here and continue to complain every day because our conversations never change. We might have spoke about something wonderful that happened over the weekend, but it always gravitated back to the negatives. And I just was tired of just speaking so negatively. I was zero worried about leaving. I felt I had a lot of support from the people in my life. They also had to hear my complaining. So whenever I made that decision to leave, it was a definite, final, ultimate decision for me. There was no looking back. I had just been awarded Teacher of the Year the previous year. I left in the middle of the school year, which I know was not ideal. So I left right after Christmas break, but I knew it was something that I had to do for myself. And I have zero regrets. I am a little bit different than Christina in that I would never go back to education again. That's a ship that has sailed for me.
Well, I think what I hear from both of you is that you were really trusting your gut. And, there may have been some fear at some point, right? But you let that go and kind of did anyway. And I think also what I'm hearing from both of you is that you really listened to yourself, right? Chrissy, you were saying, this is not a good fit for me right now, and I'm not happy, and I'm going to do something about it. And I think it's important, no matter what career we're in, to not just sort of blindly go from job to job to job, but to really take time to self-reflect and think about, is this where I want my career to be going? Am I happy right now? Could I be doing something different? Our careers are journeys, not destinations. So Christina, I would love to hear from you about what you're doing now, maybe what transferable skills you use, and maybe what you think the future might hold.
That's a lot. So right now I am an independent consultant with Usborne Books and More, which is a direct sales company that sells children's books, well, babies to teens, so children's books. And I started this 3 years ago, and I went to the way, if you aren't familiar with Usborne Books and More, you do parties. It's kind of like Tupperware parties for books. And so I went to an online party, and the reason I was invited to that party is because Usborne had just released, I'll call them UBAM, by the way, if you'll hear, that's Usborne Books and More. UBAM had just released a bunch of books in Spanish. Oh, hello. This is my daughter. Hey, can you go find Daddy, please? He's supposed to be on kid duty, but you know how it goes. So I had been invited to this party because they had released a bunch of Spanish books, and I'm raising my children to be bilingual. And like I said, I used to teach in Spanish. So bilingualism is really important to me. I grew up in Venezuela, so I've been bilingual my whole life. And I always want more Spanish books in my home. So, hey girls, I'm sorry.
You know what, as teachers, one of the things we all know how to do is to go with the flow and to be flexible. I have a 20-year-old cat who is on the bed right now going about her business. And so that's sort of work from home issues, but it's not a problem. Children are a joy. So take it away, Christina.
Okay. So anyway, Spanish books, I was really into them, and I know a lot of bilingual families because that's who I, seek out. And so I was like, well, they don't know about these books either. I want to be sure they know. And so I started selling them, and sure enough, a lot of my friends were really interested. They hadn't, heard about the books. And I mean, honestly, my business with Usborne Books and More has kind of snowballed. It's gone very well, and I lead a team of people now, and I continue to have parties and sell the books. And the best thing about it, other than having a humongous library of books, which I do, so many books, is that I get to be home with my kids. It doesn't interfere with my mom job. And when I decided to stay home, that was my job. I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to mom it. It's all I'm going to do. And, but at the same time, I was a scholar before that. And it's really hard to just shift to being a mom and to stop learning and to stop, self-development. That wasn't my brain couldn't process that. And just for as exhausting as it is to be a mom and how you're constantly busy, it's not necessarily brain stimulating, right? I mean, I didn't necessarily learn at a high level. And so I needed something else. And before I even quit working, I was like, what am I going to do that can fit with my job as a mom? And my best friend was like, you haven't even quit yet. Why are you thinking about that? But that's because I knew that I wouldn't be able to just be home and not work too. And so there's a lot of opportunities like that. This one worked really well for me because of the Spanish, because of the literacy connection and the books. And to me, it perfectly lined up with what I'd already been doing. It's the world of literacy, and we're teaching kids, and there's tons of nonfiction books that we sell. And I'm always educating parents on how to, read with their kids and get more out of it and stuff. So I felt like it really lined up. And we have a lot of teachers, former teachers and current teachers that sell books with us, because it's, obviously it's a very aligned field to sell books and to teach, right? So that's kind of what I'm doing now. Also, this year I started formally homeschooling my daughters. My older one is 8 and my younger one's 5, and she's not technically in kindergarten yet, but that's been a whole new experience. And Chrissy, what you're saying, you're never going back to education. I'm learning a whole lot about the public school system that makes me never want to send my children back. I feel like I've learned too much, and things that as a public school student and teacher, I never saw. And now I just have a very different perspective on it. And I like the idea that children learn differently than the way we're teaching them in school. So I don't know that my kids will ever go back to public school. But I like teaching them in the way that we're doing it. And I also have to say, I also teach my team. I'm a coach in that sense, and I work with other women to help them advance their careers. And I think that's really good too. I feel like I have been able to use a lot of the skills and even improve a lot of the skills I had as a teacher, both as a mom, as a homeschool teacher, and as a literacy advocate and a team leader. So there's a lot going on there.
There is a lot going on there, and I picked up on a few things. One, that even while you were still in the classroom, you were thinking, what might come next for me, right? And the best time to start thinking about career development is now. Even if you're happy in your career, you don't necessarily want to move. You want to think about, what might be next for me? What skills do I enjoy using the most? What other opportunities could I see for myself? And, I survived Hurricane Katrina, and that made me really have to change my career on a dime. And we've all seen with the pandemic that things can change literally overnight. And so I think one of the things that all of us can do, no matter what profession we're in, is to really be thinking about ongoing career development and imagine other opportunities for ourselves, because we never may know when we want to get a shift. And one of those things is doing what Christina did, was to really identify the skills that she liked to use, and also to look at the values that were really important to her. And I'm hearing that, public school wasn't the right fit for you and for your children. And, I probably wouldn't send my cat to public school either. I don't think that would be a really good fit for her. I've also homeschooled her for the last 20 years. But I do think that there are also many good things happening in public schools as well. And I think, we can choose what's right for us and still, want to advocate for everybody. Because I think everyone, no matter where they go to school, whether it's public or private or parochial or homeschool, that every child deserves an outstanding education. So, Christy, I would love to hear you tell us more about what you do. Maybe what transferable skills, you got there, and how you think about your own career development. I know that's a lot. And I also wanted to say to everyone listening, please feel free to use the reaction buttons to engage. If you're thinking, I saw Joan say, good for you. If you have a comment that you want to share, if you've got questions that you're thinking about, by all means, chime in. This is a group event. So Chrissy, take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, I pretty much just woke up one day and said, this is it. I'm gonna move forward and I'm gonna look for another job. And I kind of did a pro and con list in my head, and I also listed out things that I felt I was very good at in my current job, and what I think would have been transferable, and what I enjoyed the most and I felt I was really good at was like workflow development, lesson planning, those sorts of things. So I tried to see how I can branch that into any other career. And my ex-husband, who I was married to at the time, worked at Auctioner, and he said, you should just go look what's on Auctioner's website. I live in the city of New Orleans. And there was like an instructional design job that was for their medical record system. It was a job that essentially was to create the build documents, the testing documents, create tests for the people who are going to be working in it. So the people who do the functions, like if you got a call for customer service and ask a question at Auctioner, if you've got a question about your bill or something like that, I was teaching the people who you were calling. Essentially was what I was doing. So I applied for the job. All of the people on the team were ex-teachers, every single one of them, ex-classroom teachers. So it was very, very easy to transition. And so I just went in, got some training, and then would just go and dig in the system and build that manual for those people who were going to take on the job. And then I did that for about 1.5 years, and I realized that teaching adults is actually way similar to teaching children than I ever thought. And at that point, I thought, I'm really ready to let this go. And at that same time, the person who actually built the EMR system was leaving. And she said to me, I think you'd be really great at this. Why don't you go ahead and apply for that job? So I did, and that I got that job. Again, my degree is just elementary education from K to 8. You don't need a degree for the job that I'm currently in. You just have to pass sort of like a ACT type test to get your interview. Once you pass that, they'll interview you. And Auctioner, the organization I worked at the time, paid for my training. So I have several in-depth certifications so that I can build in the actual EMR system. So I worked at Auctioner, did that for several years, and decided as well to go into the consulting world. So I work for a consulting firm called Nordic, which is a very well known consulting firm. And the software system I work in is Epic. I guess the best way to describe it, as I said, I'm kind of a modified computer software developer. So I'm not the traditional one that you guys might think of as the ones with the dashes and the stars and the lines and, the matrix. It's not like that at all. So I do a lot of, I meet with executives. They talk to me about what they would like to do in the system. For example, Maybe a patient, maybe you go to the doctor twice in a day and they only want to charge a copay for the first visit of the day, for example. I hear what they have to say. I then take it back and I try to build it in the system. And then once it's built in the system and tested, I create workflow documentation for the folks that are actually going to be working in the system. So I kind of do that start to finish handoff. Also fix broken things. So, there's lots of broken things in the system. So as a consultant, I essentially go into underperforming hospital locations and help them clean their system up. And then I leave and go on to the next.
I heard a couple of themes, and some of these apply to what Christina was saying too. But definitely, Chrissy, you were saying that it was a journey, right? That you went into a position that sort of resembled teaching in some kind of way. And when you were there, you're like, there are actually other opportunities I didn't know about. So it's that willingness to be open to serendipity and opportunity, things that you may not have planned on. And then also too, about that continuing education piece, that it's not just a matter of, okay, I'm going to leave my job in teaching, and but I'm going to continue to learn something, and that's going to help to propel me to the next level. And one other thing that I heard, and that is that you said, I just had an elementary education degree. I heard that just. And as women, and as teachers, we often qualify our experience, and we sort of play it down. Well, I'm just doing this, or I'm just a teacher. And in turn, we get feedback from society on that as well. And that is, we get the feedback that teaching isn't necessarily worthy, right? That teaching, people do that because they can't do anything else, which is amazing, because if it weren't for teachers, we wouldn't have doctors and lawyers and astronauts and artists, and we wouldn't have plumbers, right? We wouldn't have all of these wonderful professions that we need to have. And so I just want to catch that, Chrissy, a little bit, because I think even sometimes if people are frustrated with teaching, or they're just done with teaching, right, to never minimize the impact that we do. And I see you nodding your head on that.
Yeah, I would actually like to say that elementary education degree has gotten me to where I am today. I'm a single mom of a 7-year-old. He goes to a private school here in the city. I was able to purchase a condo on my own, and am now selling it and buying my first big girl house in the city of New Orleans. And I honestly wouldn't be where I am without that education degree.
Christina, what would you say about that?
About the just being a teacher? Yeah, no, I think you and I talked on the phone, and I did something similar, and you were like, hey, don't do that. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think even what I'm doing now, I think direct sales gets a bad rap sometimes. And it's like, oh yeah, people don't want to come to your things, or they don't want that, if they don't believe, I don't know, they think we're trying to swindle them or something. But and maybe there's some companies that are like that, but the company I work for isn't like that at all. And I feel like they're really looking out for us. And so I think sometimes in my current field, it's really easy to say oh, I just sell children's books or whatever. And I think also that when I was just selling children's books and I didn't have a team, I felt it even more, that what I'm doing isn't valuable. But I mean, there are plenty of women, all the people on my team are women. There are plenty of women on my team who don't have teammates. They haven't recruited anybody. They just sell children's book. And I don't think that what they're doing isn't valuable. A big part of what we do is to promote literacy and to encourage people to read. And I think I'm surprised how often I hear parents say that they don't read to their babies because they don't understand, or they stop reading aloud once their kids learn to read. There's so much research that goes against both of those ideas, but parents don't know that because they're not going to school to become educators. So I think we have to, like, in what I do is like, we have to look at what we do and say, okay, but every little thing I do is meaningful to somebody. And even if for me, I'm like, oh, I'm just selling children's books. It's like, no, you're actually like impacting the lives of children. And but I think, yeah, we definitely downplay it. And I agree, we need to stop doing that. It's definitely difficult, and I think it's like culturally present. But
yeah, I think it is. I think it is culturally present. And I think that's why a lot of teachers, whether they're planning on leaving the profession or not, feel frustrated, because as educators, we know how much they're putting not only during the day into the classroom, but at night, they carry the worries of those children around with them constantly. And so I think it's important, if we value and model that, hopefully that will change. I do think because of the pandemic, when children were staying home and they were suddenly homeschooled, I think some parents had kind of an overnight epiphany about like, oh, that teacher's actually working really hard and doing something that I find impossible. So, I think teachers have gained some more respect. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're ever paid what we're worth. I know people who have been working for 20 years, almost have a PhD and are making $60,000 a year. And I just don't, see how that's possible. I think one of the things that I had to learn for myself is that it is possible to really value what you're doing and then also want to be paid what you're worth. And, there's that old saying that teachers are in it for the outcome, not the income. But last time I checked, you can't pay the mortgage with good intentions. And so I think it's okay, whether we stay in the profession or not, to look out for our own financial interests. And that in no way doesn't mean that we, that we don't love children or that we don't care about, educating people, right? And even if you leave the profession, doesn't necessarily mean that you hate teaching. It just means that it's not the right thing for you right now. I actually have people in my family who were in other professions, banking, for example, and in their 50s decided teaching is the right thing for me. And so for the lesson for me in all of this is that as we're moving through our careers, to evaluate what is right for us right now and to make decisions that are going to work for us right now. And part of that, what I heard both of you talking about to some degree, was work-life balance. Chrissy said, you know what? I'm able to, buy the house that I want. I'm able to spend time with my son. Can you talk a little bit more, Chrissy, about what work-life balance means to you and how making a career switch was, a good move for you?
Yeah, so for me, education, it was a lot more than just knowing about American history. There's all the kids in the classroom as well, and worrying about their going-ons and why they're misbehaving here and there. So my mind literally was never able to turn off from my work. So even if I were out to dinner with friends, I was still thinking about what more can I do here, or what extension can I add to this lesson to make it better. And that really restricted me from being able to just live my life, because my life was teaching. And it just became for me too much. And in my current role, I mean, I do have to work sometimes. I'm actually an hourly contract employee. So sometimes I do have to work after hours, but what I do know is when at the end of the day, when I take my notes and turn my computer off, it's off. And my entire evening can be dedicated to spending time with my friends or my family or my son or whatever. And I don't have that hesitation or guilt that I personally had when I was in education. So it's been a huge weight and a huge shift for me in my work-life balance, for sure.
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about our own career development, that sometimes we're just focused on the next job or how we want to make more money or gain more titles. But at the end of the day, our lives are our lives. And I would like to think that our lives are more important than our work. Not that our work doesn't carry great weight, but it's only part of our lives. And I think that we are entitled to be happy and to be fulfilled in our work, but also in our personal lives as well. And sometimes teachers aren't given that privilege, right? They're supposed to do whatever it's absolutely going to take at whatever sacrifice. And I think it's okay that, as teachers, we can be concerned about other people, but that doesn't mean we have to sacrifice our entire lives, and that it's okay. We're human beings too. Christina, what would you have to say about work-life balance?
Yeah, I was the same when I was a teacher. It was constant. Before I was a teacher, when I just worked as like an assistant, that didn't apply, because the responsibilities weren't mine. I just would go in and the teachers would tell me what they needed me to do. But once I became a teacher, I mean, I don't know how many Friday nights I was there till 7, just so that I wouldn't have to go in on the weekends to be ready for the next week. And I know part of it is that I only taught for 3 years. I think the people who start in one grade and stay in that grade for a long time, I think they get a little bit more efficient. I know I have a couple of friends who are like that, but I didn't. I switched grades every year. And my first year was just a mess, because despite the teacher education program, they don't actually prepare you for your first year of teaching. It was all the time, and I was constantly working. And so when I got pregnant, it was like, yeah, I can't do this and be a mom, like not the kind of mom I wanted to be. So there definitely wasn't any work-life balance before I had kids. And then having kids, I think that really pushed me to like, I don't want to be here all the time, and it is hard because you care about your students, and you want to do the best for them and all of that. And so it's hard to say like, hey, this is too much. You're asking too much of me. The demands are just too high. And then now in my current job, well, my current job is super flexible. I mean, I definitely make my own hours. It's been great because when I started, my youngest was in kindergarten. She did go to public school, and my oldest was in kindergarten, and my youngest was napping. And so I would only work when they were asleep or not home. And like, I literally don't think they knew I had a job, because I didn't have to be working when they were around. So when they were present, I was with them. And then that's evolved, like it's been a really wonderful job to have, because as their schedules have changed, I've been able to change my schedule. And right now I'm actually in a moment of like, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with my job because of this homeschooling thing. Homeschooling, when you become a homeschool teacher, you're back to being a teacher. And there's a lot of preparation, and it takes a lot of time. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out, how to do it all, I guess, how to be the teacher, how to be the mom, how to still maintain my job. But I feel like I can handle it. I feel like I can tweak things. I'm always tweaking things with my schedule. And I mean, I definitely couldn't have done that as a teacher, right? I mean, the hours are what they are. You can't say I'm only going to come in Monday morning because I have things to do the rest of the week, right? So now I have that ability to kind of say, well, for example, I'm moving this week. And so I haven't had a party in a month because I was getting ready for this move, and I can take a month off, and it doesn't really, nobody cares. Nobody's like, well, what are you doing? Obviously you can't, there's no flexibility like that in teaching, except for the summer, I guess. But even then, we all know we're still working all summer long. So yeah, I think that I think teaching in particular feels like it cuts into your life a lot, and it mentally cuts into your life too. I think my husband is able to he's a software developer or software engineer, whatever. And he's able to turn off the computer at the end of the day, and he's like, okay, I'm done, but I was never able to do that as a teacher. I'd be grocery shopping and be like, ooh, these pencils would be good for my students. Like, you're always thinking of them, because they're people, they're like these little kids, and you want to do the best for them. And so it's hard to find that balance, or at least it was for me.
Yeah, I would agree. Work-life balance is really important for me. And I struggled with that early on in my career. And at some point, I realized that for me, working for myself and having that flexibility was super important, in part because of my health. I'd had a lot of health challenges in my life. And as anyone with a chronic health condition knows, that things flare up sometimes. And for me, being able to work when I want to, and not work when I might need to take some time off. And again, I don't have children. That's not something I ever envisioned for myself. But like I said, I do have a cat who is 20, and I never expected her to live this long. And she's highly needy. And if I took a full-time job right now, it would be very difficult for her. And so I think, sometimes when you make careers, you also make sacrifices, or change careers, you make sacrifices. And there's certainly a lot of sacrifices I'm making now to, live this freelance lifestyle. But I am also really clear that it's the best thing for me right now. And I think what's really empowering is that I know that I can change my mind, right? I mean, Chrissy's saying, I don't ever want to go back to being a teacher, and that's totally okay. But I would say, and you can kind of give us a thumbs up if this is the case, that you maybe now feel empowered to realize that you can make a move when it's right for you, and that you have choices. Yep, she's giving us a thumbs up. And Christina, would you say the same thing? Yeah, thumbs up. All right. Well, we are about 40 minutes in, and I'm wondering if anyone has any questions. If you want to drop them in the chat, that would be fine. If not, you're welcome to come off mute. I would also just love to hear who's in the audience. Again, you can drop it in the chat. What is your current career? Are you a teacher? Are you looking to transfer? I know, and we'll get to you in just a second, Stephanie. I know there's some people that spent their entire careers in education, and that was a really good fit for them. But Stephanie, I'd love to hear your question.
Yes, thank you. I actually had a question for Chrissy. You mentioned that your first job, you were transitioning into what would be more of kind of a corporate training job. Did you find that there were any specific skills that you needed that the employer wanted you to have had bringing in? Or did you find that you were able to convince your employer that the education that you had was what you could use in that job?
Yeah, great question. So I think the only hesitancy that they had was that I not worked with adults, if that makes sense. I've been a middle school teacher for 10 years. So I think their biggest concern was whether or not that I could bridge that gap from speaking and educating children to doing that with adults, and would I be able to do it successfully? Aside from that, I almost felt like being a teacher and having to be super organized and on top of things, I was overly qualified for the position, and I moved in quite seamlessly. And again, teaching children and adults are really not that different after all.
All right, thank you.
I'm on mute, right? That is the story of Zoom. You start speaking and you realize you're on mute. Anyone else have any questions right now? Joan?
Yeah, I have a unique perspective of all of this because I got my teaching degree, taught 2 years, and then I have been a school counselor for over 30 years. And looking for something different. And I'm hearing you guys are just, this is a great conversation because I want that flexibility. And a lot of what you're saying are things that I love because I'm very passionate about career development, and we're not doing enough with our kids. It's what I love to do, but there's just not the time. So the conversation that's going on is very interesting, and a lot of decisions have to be made. I guess my question, especially maybe to Chrissy, it's finding those, you go out on that job search, like, okay, mine would be career development curriculum for education, or because it's lacking, and I'm an outside of the box thinker. I get really excited and passionate, but then nothing happens, and I don't even know where to look.
Yeah, so here's what got me into the job that I'm in. Auctioneer has a portal where you go in and you look up keywords for jobs. Can't put in lesson plan. I put in workflow development, and that job popped to the very top. Essentially, it's the same thing. One's a education concept or term, and the other is corporate terminology. A workflow is a lesson plan. And that's what got me to look at that job and realize, you know, I'm a little nervous about doing this, and honestly, can I teach adults? But the more I looked at the job and the description, it obviously is very different terms, but I was doing the exact same thing. And I can definitely say I'd been a teacher for 10 years at that point. The pay was about already 15K above. You know, my last job was as a public school teacher in New Orleans. So there really wasn't any reason not to just take the jump and go for it at that point for me.
Joan, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak a little bit to that as well. You know, being a career coach, this is something I help people with all of the time. And so I would say the first thing to do is to start networking with people. You're free to, you know, network with me on LinkedIn. I know a lot of people, and really just beginning to do a lot of research, speaking to people that have jobs that might be of interest to you. You know, not looking for a job right away, but seeing is what's out there. I call it trick or treating. Just kind of getting, yeah, it's trick or treating, getting different information, maybe taking on some volunteer roles. But it's really through that exploration and open to serendipity that you will begin to find that jobs you didn't even know exist, or titles you've never heard of, will reveal themselves to you. And little by little, you're going to find your path. Gabby, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, about LinkedIn networking. You know, I'm a huge proponent of LinkedIn. And if you want to work somewhere, follow that company or organization on LinkedIn and see if you have any mutual connections. And if you don't see that you have any mutual connections, because sometimes you never know, you might have someone in your network who might be currently working there who you can ask questions about, or they can connect you to someone there in the role that you want. Now, if you don't have a mutual connection, you can still see everybody's job titles, and you can, you know, do a cold outreach touch through messaging them and connecting with them and seeing if they'd be interested in doing a quick coffee chat with you. One thing that was, I'm just going to kind of shift a little bit, but Chrissy mentioned like the timing of her leave, and you know, it was in the middle of the school year. And that really stood out to me because I was concerned about leaving. Just so you all know, I do fundraising. So I do development work and raise funds for nonprofit organizations. And I worked for a law school, and I had only been there a few months. And, you know, I think there's this misconception of like, you have to stay at least a year or years before you can leave. And my biggest, and that was a really huge challenge for me. Do I leave now because I'm unhappy? You know, is the timing bad? And I just realized that there's never going to be a good time to leave. And, you know, employers have they can terminate you on any grounds at any time. So I just think, you know, I'm unhappy. The sooner I leave, the better opportunities I could pursue. And, you know, I did have a colleague help me craft a story in terms of why I'm leaving, not to throw the my supervisor or law school or whatever reasons under the bus, but to be like, I realize that I miss doing this kind of work. And so I'm leaving and looking for other things so I can continue to hone in on these skills, so I can move in this direction, and just really crafting that stories to take the attention away from like your short duration at a place. And so, yeah, it just stood out to me because, you know, you're never going to find the right time to leave, but if you have the right reasons to leave and that right intention, and I just speak to the great resignation, like so many employers are offering so many better benefits now because they really want to retain their employees. And now I'm in the best position I could have ever asked for, even though I was only at this last position for 8 months, I think. And yeah, and I have better benefits. I have an amazing supervisor, and I get to work full-time remote with like unlimited sick time to do whatever it is I need to do to take care of myself, because our mission has to do with, you know, mental health. And so I couldn't be happier. And so I just want to encourage others to consider that too, when, you know, changing careers.
Thanks, Gabby. I've known Gabby for a number of years, and she has really invested a lot in her career development and has been able to craft a career. She's a great one to connect with on LinkedIn. Gabby, you know, you feel free to drop in your LinkedIn And Christina, we'll get to you in just a second, but anyone on here, if you want to network, feel free to drop in your LinkedIn, your email, whatever it is that you feel comfortable sharing. And that way y'all can continue the conversation after we're done here. But Christina, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I just wanted to add that, like I mentioned, I had been thinking of working again before I even quit my teaching job. I was like, what am I going to do after this? And I think what it came, I was fortunate that I didn't have to work. My husband takes care of all of that. And so for me, it was like the first time in my life, I was like, oh, I can just like do whatever I want to do. And so that question just kept coming up, like, well, what do I want to do? And one thing that I was, I kind of ended up doing was like making this list of things, so like, for example, Spanish is really important to me, being able to use my bilingualism to do something in the world. I like working with kids. So it really started like really simple of, what kinds of things do I like to do I want to do? And then when this selling books opportunity came up, even I was like, I don't know, it's direct sales. I'm like, I don't know about this. And my husband was like, well, it checks like all of the boxes. Like it's Spanish, it's related to literacy, it's, free, like flexibility. Like, so I think, especially because you've been in your position for so long, Joan, that like, look at all the things you love about your job and just write those down and, look for things that, even if you don't look for jobs, but like others have said, like these opportunities will come up or things that you never even considered will kind of appear and be like, oh, actually, that really connects with this thing I love about my job right now. And I was just surprised that I didn't expect to be where I am. I think it just kind of like came about and it fits me really well. So be open to that, I think.
No, these are all great pieces of career advice. And throughout this conversation, we've touched on a lot of them, which is sort of know your values, know what makes you happy, definitely need to network. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. It's okay to have a little bit of fear, right? And this is for teachers and non-teachers as well. Identify your transferable skills. Always value where you came from, and just know that even if you're leaving a position, that doesn't mean that you had to be unhappy with it or that you had to hate it or that everything about it was necessarily wrong. We've also talked about work-life balance, being open to serendipity and seeing, what may come. And so I think we've heard a lot of really good words today. And I've appreciated the questions so far. Again, yeah, go ahead and, drop your contact information in there if you want to reach out to Christina, if you want to reach out to me, if you want to reach out to Gabby. I know it looks like Marion, I know she's a job seeker, and feel free to reach out to her as well. I happen to know she's doing some amazing things around advocacy for people with invisible illnesses. Are there any other final questions before we wrap up today?
Not a question, but I forgot to add, Chrissy mentioned one really important thing that has really benefited me throughout my career, and it's asking our employers for them to sponsor us in a way. Like, see if an employer is willing to pay for your training, see if they're willing to pay for your certifications, for exams, for classes. Like, there's just so many benefits. Or like a conference, if there's a conference, a professional network membership that you want to be a part of, those are other benefits that you can ask every employer that you interview for, and that can also help you determine which employer is going to benefit you the most. So just thinking about those added benefits and areas of sponsorship, or some, that's how I got my CFRE exam paid for, is because I asked, well, if I work here, is there a professional development budget, or you sponsor me to take this exam? So yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
No, I think professional development is super important, whether you stay in one career or transfer, right? And especially as teachers, we know how important learning is and ongoing learning to our personal and professional development. Marion, do you have a question?
Yes, this is either for Chrissy or Christina. Transitioning to a new career or new field can be terrifying. What is one expected benefit that you found? So one positive thing that happened that you thought, wow, I didn't know that would happen when I transitioned into this field.
Well, for me, it was more of an emotional gain. As an educator, as a teacher, I could never achieve the level of expert that really mattered to me. And that's because every kid is so unique and so different. So I couldn't just find that level and just run with it. It never worked. Versus in the role that I'm in now, I can truly say I'm an expert in my field. I can speak, and again, this is a personal thing, but that was to me that sort of trigger of like ultimate happipiness, that I am in a place and in a role that I would never have expected myself in IT, head down, plugging away in the build of a system. But it truly gives me the happiness I needed because I'm able to feel like the expert. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's when I knew, right? So that's when I knew, whenever I finally was able to like be successful and create that first workflow and demo that first workflow and get feedback and it really go well, is when I knew I had made the right change.
So you were in the right place. You found
Oh,
the right
absolutely.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and again, I definitely do still teach in a sense, because even though I'm building things, I still have to explain what I'm building. So I do still get that taste today.
Thank you.
Christina, did you want to add to that? If not,
Yeah,
okay.
if that's okay. Yeah, I was surprised, I think, and pleasantly surprised, is I love to lead people and I love to coach. When you're a classroom teacher, you're like at the head of the class. And so the head of the classroom, and you know what that's like, right? You're in this like authoritarian position, but that's totally different from having a group of essentially peers, and you just happen to know a little more than they do because you've been around longer, and then you can help them reach their goals. And I love that part. So when you think about what is the next thing I'm going to do, I'm always thinking about the next thing I'm going to do too. And I'm like, wow, I really love coaching people, and I love learning and teaching. Like sharing what I know and helping people reach their goals is way cool. Like, I didn't see that coming at all. I had no idea that that would be something that I would get out of this position that I'm doing right now either. It kind of came out of nowhere. Right now, just to like give you an idea, I have a team of like 60 people, which I don't know what, it just blew up. Like, I think I had like 2 people on my team, and then now I have like 60. And 2 of the people on my team are also leaders. So it's coaching leaders how to be leaders. And there's so much professional development from my team, actually. And it's just a really good opportunity. And talk about transferable, like that ability. I mean, I know that I can take that and say like, well, I led a team of 60 people and taught them, how to have parties and how to be leaders themselves. And that's been really a really wonderful surprise that I've really enjoyed.
Well, thank you. That's really nice to hear.
I'm muted. There we go. I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And even though I'm the one who sort of, got the whole ball rolling, I've actually learned a lot today too. I've been invigorated by what Gabby and Christina and Chrissy have had to share. I'm really thankful for all the lessons and the wisdom that they've shared, and also for the people who attended and the people who brought up questions. So this, just kind of FYI, this is being recorded, and I will send it out to everyone who registered. You'll be getting it via email, a link probably in the next 72 hours. Like I said, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing resources, tips, and tricks. I actually have a newsletter called Joyful Journeys to Career Success, and that highlights clients who haven't worked with them in 3 to 4 years. And it really highlights how our work together helped to get them started. But then once they did that, they kind of really took it off and went on their own. And, they share their triumphs and their fears, their transferable skills, talking a lot about what Christina and Chrissy have had to say today. So again, I want to thank everyone for attending. I look forward, hopefully, to connecting with all of you on LinkedIn. And I sounds cheesy, but I really, really believe this, or I would not be in the business that I am. I really do believe that the best is yet to come for everyone. And so I want to leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.